Hello, this presentation is about finding money for college. So today we're going to talk about understanding aid, understanding who can receive financial aid and how much, and then we'll talk about starting the FAFSA and then some resources that may help you along the way. So part one is understanding the types of aid. So financial aid is money for educational expenses for college or career school. There are two major types of financial aid: money that does not have to be repaid, and those are called grants, work study, and scholarships. And the second type of financial aid has to be repaid, and that's called a student loan. So looking at financial aid that does not have to be repaid. The first type is called a grant, and this is often called gift aid. So to find out if you qualify for any grants, you must apply for FAFSA. There's no additional steps that you have to complete. You just complete the application for FAFSA, and then they'll let you know if you qualify or not for any grants. The second option for financial aid is work study. Work study is when you have a job on a college campus, and because of that, that helps you pay some of your tuition. So in your FAFSA, if you're interested in doing work study, you need to make sure that you just indicate that in the application. And the last type of financial aid is scholarships. And these are also funds that do not have to be repaid. So scholarships are based on both academic merit and then also financial need. So there are a couple different places for students to apply for scholarships, and there are tons of scholarships. So for the first website that you want to, or the first place that you want to check is the college you're applying to. And so to find any scholarship that they may be offering, just type the college name and freshman scholarships. The other two places you can check are the GISD local scholarship page. These are scholarships offered by local businesses and organizations and usually are only open to students in GISD or Williamson County. The next place you can check is the national scholarship page. There's a list of scholarships open to most students in the United States. So second, let's look at financial aid that does have to be repaid. And this is called student loans. And just to kind of keep it in perspective, in 2012, about 71% of all students graduating from a four-year institution had taken out a student loan. So it is very common. We just encourage you to be as conservative as possible if this is the route that you take. So to see if you qualify for a student loan, you must complete the FAFSA. If you borrow student loans, you will have 6 months after you graduate before you have to start making payments. And there's two types of student loans. One is called a subsidized, and that is when the government pays interest on the loans while you are in college. And then the second type is unsubsidized, and that is when the government does not pay interest on the loan when you're in college. Therefore, from the very day that you take it out, you have to start paying interest on it. So this is a really great calculator. If you want to play around with it, it kind of gives you an idea of what your payment would be if you borrowed if you borrowed money for college. This link also has information on the current interest rates for direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans for undergraduate students. And just when you're playing with this calculator, know that usually the loan is paid over 10 years. So it's going to be about 120 payments. So for this example, over the course of 4 years, I think that this is like 2.5%. If you borrowed $25,000 over all 4 years of college, and the interest rate is 2.5%, and you're going to pay that back over 10 years, that means your monthly payment would be $235 a month, which isn't too bad. Obviously, the more that you borrow, the higher that your payment is going to be. The less that you borrow, the lower that your payment is going to be. So the second part of this is just wondering who can get financial aid and how much. So for you to be able to qualify for federal student aid, you have to be a U.S. citizen or national or an eligible non-citizen. You have to have a high school diploma or equivalent. You have to have an eligible degree or being enrolling in an eligible degree or certificate program in college or career school. That just means usually a non-for-profit school You have to have a valid social security number. If you're a male, you have to be registered for the Selective Service, and there will be a piece of the or part of the application that asks you about that. And then also satisfactory academic progress in college or career school. So you will get or you will apply for financial aid every single year. But once you're in college, if your grades dip below a certain point, you may not qualify again. So you have to make sure that you're keeping your grades up. And then there are a couple other little things that are little points about eligibility here. If for some reason you don't meet the first criteria, you're not a U.S. citizen, please reach out to your counselor because there are some other supplemental applications such as TASFA that we can direct you to. So the next question is, how much federal aid can I qualify for? So when you complete FAFSA, you'll put information in, such as your student and parent income, and sometimes your assets, and how many people are in your household, and then how many of those people are in college. The Department of Education will then look at that information and determine something called an EFC, which stands for Expected Family Contribution. That's basically their estimate of how much they think your family can help with college. So COA stands for cost of attendance. And so cost of attendance often includes tuition, fees, room and board, transportation, and usually some other things too, such as books. So how you can figure out your financial need then is you take your cost of attendance, so how much it's going to cost for you to go to school, minus your expected family contribution, so how much the government thinks that you can help out with college, and that will be your financial need. So this is a slide, or this slide lists the most commonly known federal student aid programs and the maximum amount that the student can receive in 21-22. So federal Pell Grants is $6,496. And again, that's the maximum amount. There's no guarantee that any student will receive that maximum amount from any given school. Federal Work Study depends on each independent school. Direct loans, so again, that's money that you can borrow. That's up to $5,500. And subsidized loans means that you will not be paying interest. The government will be paying interest on it from the time that you take it out. Direct unsubsidized loans are up to $20,500. And then direct plus loans, those are not for students to take out. That is the cost of attendance minus all the other aid received. So this is a really cool slide just because you can kind of see how it all comes together. So this is from the college, giving them an estimate of how much the cost of attendance is going to be. They say tuition is about $16,000, room and board is $8,000, books and supplies $1,000, transportation $400, and miscellaneous. So they estimate that the average student spends about $27,850. This next part is the student must have completed the FAFSA, and they're saying that these are the grants that the student was awarded. So basically, the student was awarded $24,500 in free money. So that means that there's about $3,300 left the student has to pay. So down here at this bottom part, then it shows how much the student can borrow. So between these two loans, the student can borrow about $3,500. And it shows you right here that if the student borrowed this amount for this full first school year, when they graduate from college, the combined total of these, so about $37, $38 is what they would have to pay back for the next 10 years. And this is, keep in mind, this is just for one school year. This one's a little bit fuzzy here, but this is another example of looking at the tuition and financial aid. So for this particular student, the total amount for the college is about $45,000. Here it tells you what grants that they qualify for. This is the total amount of grants for the year. And then here they actually included the loans that they might borrow. And then at the bottom, it tells you what is the cost of attendance and how much the student would need to pay out of pocket. And that's why we encourage you to apply to many schools. Is sometimes that you get these letters back and the cost of attendance out of pocket is $16,000. So you always want to make sure that you have a backup plan in case that number is too high for you and your family. So the third part we're going to talk about is just completing the FAFSA. So for a lot of students, the FAFSA, or a lot of students and families, completing the FAFSA is really intimidating, but it's actually very easy. It takes about 30 minutes. If your parents completed their tax return online, then they can basically sync that with the application. Just a couple of things. You want to make sure that you're going to the FAFSA.gov, and FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Student Aid. So FAFSA.gov is the easiest way to apply. It's a free application. So if at any point you're asked for any sort of payment, you're not at the correct website. So just make sure that you're doing the FAFSA.gov. And the application takes about 30 minutes. So we'll walk through in just a second how you get that started. The second place that you can look for student aid is via state resources. So the link above has a list of some grants offered to students in Texas. However, almost all of these are tied to your financial aid application, your FAFSA application. The third place you can look for aid is via college websites. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. If you just type in Texas State plus freshman scholarships, you'll be able to see what scholarship opportunities they have. And then the last place is the GSD local and national scholarship page, and also the national search engine. So you can click on each of these links. Here it shows you for coming up April 1, this is the application. It says you must be a resident of Williamson County. You must attend Texas A&M and College Station, be a graduating high school student. And the preference is given to students majoring in construction science. So each of these will tell you what the application is, what the application due date is, and then any requirements that you have to have in order to apply. For the most part, a lot of them are pretty generic, that you just have to be a graduating senior from a GISD school. The second place you can check is this GISD National Scholarship page. And there are a ton of these, and some of them are in Texas, some outside of Texas, but this is the link currently for students, or for scholarship opportunities for students that are graduating in 2021. And then the last place that you can check is any national search engine. So on this local scholarship page on the right side, these are all searchable databases where you can go in and create an account and say, I'm a senior student, this is my age, this is my GPA, and it's going to bring up all the scholarships that you may qualify for. So when you're starting the application for financial aid, the first step is that you need to create a username and password called an FSA ID. And if you just follow that link, you'll be able to create one. It's basically your user ID. And so the student has to create one and the parent has to create one as well. You cannot share one. And you also have to have a separate email address. So if the student uses one email address, you have to have a separate email address for the parent's FSA ID. And then also make sure you don't tell anybody your FSA ID, because that's how you're formally signing these documents. But you do want to make sure you either write it down or keep it or if you write it down, to keep it in a safe place. So once you get your FSA ID, you just want to make sure that you look at the list of items needed to complete FAFSA. And there's a couple different things, pretty easy: your social security number, alien registration number if you're not a U.S. citizen, all of your documents that you used to file your taxes, bank statements and records of investments, untaxed income, and then just again your FSA ID. And if you want, you can preview the whole entire application. There is a paper application you can complete. It just takes a little bit longer to process. So you can go ahead and preview this application so you can kind of see the types of questions that they're asking. It's not anything tricky. It's mostly based on your taxes from the last year. So you're going to apply at FAFSA.gov. The application opens up October 1, and that was October 1 last year. So it's still open. There are some state deadlines. I would just say go ahead and try to apply for that as soon as possible. You need your FSA ID to start the application. And if you have any questions, just make sure that you reach out. There's a couple of phone numbers. There's also a live chat that you can do. And then just make sure that when you finish, when you get to the end of the application, that you wait until you see that it says, yes, your application has been submitted before logging out. Once you go ahead and submit that, you're going to watch for a response by email or mail confirming that your FAFSA form was processed. You're going to double check that your information is correct by logging in on the FAFSA site and reviewing your data and correcting the mistakes and submit the corrected info. And don't update info that was correct on the day you signed your FAFSA form. So you're only going to do those last 3 things only if they let you know that there's an error or you need to take some sort of action. Otherwise, if they say it's processing and then it's completed, then there's not anything that you have to do. The next thing you're going to do is watch for emails or letters from the schools you're considering. And those are going to look like the ones that I showed you earlier, where it tells you what the cost of attendance is, what your expected family contribution is, and then what the net cost of the school is going to be. And then make sure that you're watching your email as well. Sometimes colleges will ask for additional information for them to process your paperwork. So make sure you're just checking your email and you're getting that additional paperwork to them as soon as possible, especially if you're selected for verification. Make sure that you meet all deadlines because we don't want you to miss out on any aid. Once you get those letters, then you just have to evaluate the aid offers from the colleges. And then once you decide which school to attend, keep in touch with the financial aid office to find out when and how you'll get your financial aid. Most of that is done electronically, but some schools do it a little bit differently. But that information usually comes via email. So here are some resources. The first one is the FAFSA website. The second is a video that kind of just gives you an overview of the FAFSA, what information they look at, and how that EFC is determined. And then if you hit any bumps in the road, you can contact FAFSA. There is a phone number and an email. And like I said, also the live chat is a really good resource as well. You can also reach out to your CCMR specialist on campus or your high school counselor. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a good day.